Welcome to Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. I am your host, Shayna Terrell, educator activist dedicated to the lifelong struggle of freedom and liberation for my people. Major shout out to all our co-conspirators joining us today. You have come to the place where we talk to real people in the real struggle, doing the real work. Today we will be discussing Brothers Impacting Education. Larry Irvin, CEO of Brothers Empowered to Teach, is here with us to discuss Black male educators, how they can defy convention, and give us insight into what it takes to create a pathway to education for aspiring Black male educators. All right, Larry, welcome. We're excited for you to be here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Can you share with us who you are? What should we know about you, your work, past and present?
As far as who I am personally, Larry Irvin, CEO, founder of Brothers Empowered to Teach. We look to incentivize and inspire more men of color to become educators, more Black men to become educators here in New Orleans, Louisiana, regionally, and soon to be nationally next year. But born and raised in New Orleans, I'm the son of a lifelong educator. My mom was an educator here in the city, early childhood education. So, I had a very positive foundation laid for me academically. I've never struggled academically. But like many young Black men who grew up in urban environments, right, my mom was an educator. She worked 2 and 3 jobs a lot of times to supplement her income. And that led to me having to go outside, right? I had to go outside and find my representations of manhood and masculinity and what that meant for me. Trying to subconsciously trying to fill that void. And New Orleans is New Orleans. The criminal element of New Orleans is very, very ubiquitous. It's very accessible. It's a lifestyle that's glamorized, and like many young men, I had that grapple or that fight with sort of my consciousness and who I was as far as those representations in my community. A lot of times, those representations were affirmed in a negative context. I saw what I saw in my neighborhood, and I ran with who I ran with in my neighborhood. So I sort of had this. I like to tell folks I have a balance of experiences, if you will. So whether on one end academically, have a journalism background, things of that nature, graduated from LSU in journalism. And my mom being an educator, right, and having that experience, and a lot of times when I got in trouble or half days or things of that nature, I had to go sit in her classroom. So I learned, humility and servitude at a very, very early age. I think I've always been being conditioned to be an educator or a leader of educators, but I definitely pushed back on that as much as I could and try to sort of derail that trajectory as much as I could. My mom was an educator; she always asked me to be a teacher from young. But I always did everything I could to sort of like not go that route. I think just as a rebellious child, right? But I just never saw myself in that light, which kind of ties into the work that we do, right? We don't. That wasn't a conversation for me and my constituents, and I don't know if it's a conversation right now for the new generation. But we're trying to change that and add a new representation.
Definitely working hard to change that narrative and having young people understand that teaching is a revolutionary act and what it means to teach for liberation. Just connecting it to something else for them. But I love your story, and I love your story about just who you are. It mirrors mine a little bit, right? Like, you have families who work hard, who set boundaries, who set values for you. But, sometimes given the circumstances of the neighborhood, you have this push and pull of who you're going to be, who you're going to put yourself around. And then, of course, as a teenager, you're always battling those, like, my parents are saying to do this, but I'm in with my group, my crowd, my friends, and I'm going to make my own choices. I'm going to do my own exploration. But having that foundation, and I'm hearing it a lot from you, from your mother, is what really had a major impact on you. And is it safe to assume too that I was gonna say, is it safe to assume too when I would ask the question like, well, what inspired you to be an educator? It sounds like your mom was that for you.
Yeah, she was that. I mean, I've had a lot of moments of clarity, if you will, Shayna. She definitely was the sort of the foundation behind that. But my journey as a professional and personally has given me the vision and exposure as far as the black male spectrum in that experience. Right, I've been a black man, I've been a black male educator, I've been a black male student. So I sort of see things from both sides of the dichotomy. I have this colorful story, right, where some young men can really connect to, as far as me going to jail, having gun charges, things of that nature. I started this organization sort of out of survival mode, in a sense. I needed to think outside the box because I was washing dishes at making $8.50 an hour, right? As a 30-year-old man, because I had a criminal background. I couldn't utilize my education, my journalism education, things of that nature, because every time I had a background check, right? And I'm a 6'3", 6'4". I'm a big black man, right? That's a whole nother layer added on top of being black, right? So I have some people can say a very demeaning presence, you know what I mean? So I take up space. So that it's just the optics of that, and having those type of charges, those aggressive charges, really set me back. But I think those experiences really molded me to be able to tell a story in a unique way, and it really connects. I think the authenticity of that really connects, and showing that black men on a monolith, we can transition, we can grow. There's so many colorful layers that come with black men, and what we can grow to be. But a lot of times, folks try to put us in a box and really paint us with a wide brush in regards to narratives and things of that nature, and so certain archetypes and stereotypes of black men. But I think my story is really, really important from that vantage point. I've struggled with it, you know what I mean, as the work has ascended, because I think there is a deficit perspective that does come with black men in general, but then a black man with a background like mine, right? And you're talking about going into K-12 and having an impact and things of that nature. Those barriers, right? Those stereotypes, those implicit biases that's going to come with people just perceiving me a certain way and not really giving credit to the work
Yep.
and the story and what I'm doing. So it's very difficult, but I think I've been uniquely conditioned to lead this work. This is my life's work, definitely.
Yes, I mean the experience of you that you have, especially depending upon where you're working or who you're connected to, and you talking about urban environments or low income
Yeah,
environments with black and brown children, your story is definitely going to be relatable to them.
absolutely.
And one of, like you said, black men are not a monolith, right? So the story of
Yeah,
redemption that you have, that you
man.
lived, is major,
Yeah,
because I think a lot of times, right, especially young black men, they get into these spaces and they make choices and don't see a way out of it. And I tell everybody,
yeah,
we're all one bad decision away, just one bad decision away from changing our lives. And that's not
yeah,
unique to a specific population or people. It's like anybody. We are one bad decision away from changing the trajectory of our lives. But to know someone like you is a prime example of, like, I made a bad decision, but I can come up out of that and think creatively
yeah,
and uniquely, right? About how to
yes,
support yourself, and then keep pushing forward. But in your
yeah,
work with pushing forward, creating a path for other people um, to give back, to be connected to community and education, I think is huge for us to
yeah,
see. So shout out to you for overcoming,
yeah.
for sure,
I
for
appreciate it, man. Yeah,
sure.
there's a lot of different
So
layers to this work. There's a lot of different layers as far as the impact of this work and the symbolism, sort of that qualitative impact that's being had in this work. We're doing a lot. We're definitely doing a lot.
yes, and y'all are doing a lot. So tell us a little bit about Brothers Empowered to Teach. What does your
Yeah,
organization do?
yeah. So we recruit, train, place, support young black men in becoming educated. Well, not just young black men, initially young black men. So we have on one end, we have a 3-year fellowship that we now extended to 4 years. So freshmen are now eligible going into this new fiscal. But we have a undergraduate fellowship. The criteria is simple. All you need is a 2.5, be a black male
Mm.
of color, obviously, and you can be of any major. You don't have to be an education major. You can be in any major. And what we're doing is over the course of the fellowship, the first year is just an exposure year where we place you in after school programs, give you an opportunity to this is a paid opportunity. So our fellows are paid all 4 years
Mm-hmm.
with a monthly stipend in exchange for their time commitment and being exposed to classroom capacities. But it starts with after school programming, mentoring, recreational activities, things of that nature. And they do that for 10 to 12 hours for the first year. The next 3 years now is a combination of lab development, so different classes, early childhood, education, learning how the brain works, working with some of our local partners like Training Grounds, who has early childhood education and observation for K2. There's a lot of different pieces
Mm-hmm.
as far as the lab development. We've partnered with Bank Street College out of Harlem. They're leading the way as far as
Mm-hmm.
our progressive, culturally competent pedagogy that we're putting together in collaboration with them, and how we train and give our fellowship. Our fellows that pre-service training, and ultimately it's also supplemented with real in classroom, real time classroom in front of classroom experience, so they get a chance to act as shadows. They're basically apprentices for their junior and senior
Mm-hmm.
year, leading up to graduation, where they obviously get certified. But yeah, man, we're really unique in that regard because we give our fellows. A lot of our fellows aren't your typical first year teacher. That's coming from, that's a recent graduate that's going through a microwave sort of teacher training program. They're getting 3-4 years of in
Yes.
classroom experience while pursuing their own degrees in their own respect. And by the time they actually graduate and are a quote unquote first year teacher, they've been in the classroom 3 or 4 years already and really had a chance to grit their teeth on things, man. So that's what we're doing. There's a lot that goes into that, a lot of supplementary, ancillary enrichment work that we do as well. We have our Cypher series,
Yes.
which is our personal and professional development space, where we tackle everything pertinent that I feel is pertinent and that our young men feel is pertinent to the Black male experience. Everything from discussing masculinity, what does that look like today, redefining that, because we tackle that conversation head on, because we know our young men won't just be teaching other young men; they'll also be teaching young ladies, young Black ladies as well, our sisters, and we want to make sure our young men have a very sharpened and honed navigational compass in regards to how they move around classrooms and how they deal with different genders and things of that nature, and how they show up as young men, right? Because they will have a magnifying glass on them.
Yes.
It's such an underrepresented demographic in education for the last, people are still trying to figure out how to deal with Black men in education. That's a whole nother conversation. But our cyber series space addresses sort of all those issues. We take a holistic approach. We're not just recruiting teachers and training teachers. We're taking on young men, and we're developing whole young men.
Mm-hmm.
We take a holistic approach. So when Darius walks through our door, when Jerome walks through our door, we're taking on that entire young man and everything that comes with him. So we're trying to give him the tools and the resources, 360 wrapped around, not only to be a great educator, but to be a great human being first, a productive citizen first, and in turn, a byproduct of that is a great educator.
Larry, first of all, the holistic approach to how you
Yeah,
guys are grabbing and training and supporting these young men is excellent. Super excellent.
yeah, it's
There's
needed.
so many
It's
things
needed.
that you said. Yes, it's a must, right? It's necessary because the other thing that you're talking about is like accepting Jerome and Darius for who they are, but also helping them to understand who they are in the world, but then also giving them the tools to support themselves, but other young people. So not just focusing on black men, but you will be teaching young ladies and brothers. This should be your lens when you're talking to our young sisters. I mean, all of that, the holistic approach to how you're doing this work is beautiful. And of course, the one thing that I'm connected to you on and agree with wholeheartedly, and you said it, and I use this word often, is those microwave programs for teachers, and programs that have folks in it for like 8 to 12 weeks, spit you right out, and then put you in front of a classroom of kids that you have no relationship with, no connection with. You're not a content specialist, and then you don't have any technical skills to actually be teaching right now. So the fact that you guys, much like we do here at the Center for Black Educator Development, have an elongated program where you give folks the opportunity and chance after chance to have these at bats at teaching and to get the mentorship
Yes,
and the coaching that you need is super important. And the other key word you
yes.
said, baby, paid. Okay, paid. These folks aren't here working for free. They are
No
paid. They
man.
get paid on the job training. And again, I just love
Yes,
the
ma'am.
holistic approach that you guys are taking. Amazing,
Yeah, they're paid.
amazing
They're
work.
paid for
I
they're paid for their
also,
training. They're paid for their development. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead. There's a slight lag.
no, you go. Pay for development. Yep. Pay for development.
Yeah,
Pay
they
for
get paid for
training. Go ahead.
training, pay for their Cypher series. So and we're really intentional about that, Shayna, making sure, because we want them to take the profession of education and being an educator serious. And a lot of times, we've all seen the undergraduate collegiate volunteer tutor or mentor programs and things of that nature. And you're only going to get so much consistency and I think investment up front from a volunteer position. And we want them to take this seriously and let them know that we're investing deeply. Once again, not into the educator, but also the person.
Yes. And I love how in your organizational just title, you use the word empower. And I think that that's different from just saying inspiring brothers to teach or recruiting, brothers to teach. You actually feel like the organization is empowering brothers can teach.
Yes.
Can you talk about that word empowerment and why that was chosen?
Sort of what I just alluded to. So we understand once again, me being a black male, having been a black male student, right, and a black male educator, former high school football coach, former teacher. Uh, I understand from both sides of the spectrum from this dichotomy, right? What are some of the special, some of those subtle and nuanced requirements that come with being an educator, being a black male educator. So
Mm-hmm.
that wraparound conversation, that holistic conversation, we're giving the tools, resources. We're having the conversations, right? We're not. Once again, I can't stress this enough. We're creating dispositions, right? So we're not just developing an educator. We want to create a disposition that has the tool belt, the resources, the intellect, knowledge, and competency to go into what we consider right now uh, a fiery pit. Education is on fire right now. So when we're talking about being
Mm-hmm.
empowered, right? There's a lot of development and investment that goes into creating a high quality educator that can endure what the K-12 experience is for educators right now. And that's not just a black conversation, but it's an even more magnified conversation when we're talking about retention of black educators and things of that nature, right? They're a little bit further behind the eight ball in regards to having that cushion or that buffer for dealing with adversity, crisis, failure, right? So we have to really empower. That word stands true. We have to really empower and really build up and give those good competencies to our young men so they can endure and excel at the same time.
For sure. And Larry, I want to put the spotlight back on you for a little bit because I feel like you sprinkling pieces of like who Larry is throughout this conversation. But I really want to give you like we sprinkling. Okay, I did this, I did that, bam. But I really want to give you like the spotlight and the opportunity to share your journey with us. Like, how did you get into education, and then what was your journey on coming out of the K
Yeah.
12 space and starting Brothers Power to Empowered to Teach?
So like I said earlier, I think my entire journey I've been conditioned, right? Seeing being a son of an educator, having school is a lot of times, essentially 2 times a day. I went to school and I came home to my mom, and it was pop quizzes and spelling bees and things of that nature as well. So, like I said, academically, I've never really, I've always excelled. She made sure that for me and my sister Charlene. But to get to the more colorful aspects of my story, how I started in 2010, my mom passed. My mom passed, and I was, I really just hit the eject button and kind of blew my life up. Um, I just right after she passed, I got my second possession of firearm, illegal possession of firearm, and narcotics charge. It was my second one, and it just really during that time I had to really sit back and be introspective as far as what was going on with me. And so what I did was the next year I went to my alma mater, Bonneville High School, where I played football. I went spoke to one of my old coaches, and I just told him, I'm just kind of uh, I'm looking for something. I'm looking to transition. I made a couple mistakes. I tried to sort of embrace this street lifestyle. If you running with my cousins and my friends and things of that nature, and being heavily infatuated with that aspect of New Orleans. It's a very strong influence. And I was just ready to relinquish that. I was really ready to transition because I knew I had some type of greatness in me. But I
Mm-hmm.
was using it for the wrong thing, using my charisma and my use of language and things of that nature, and my stature, my presence. It was just going in the wrong direction. And I went to my old high school, man. Talked to one of my coaches who was a coach when I played, and he was the head coach at that time. And I just told him, I'm just looking for something, man. I don't know what's going on. Just trying to figure my life out. My mom just passed, that affected me in so many ways when my mom passed. And he told me to come out and coach. He said, "Man, just come out and coach. We don't have a paid position for you right now, but come out. You know, you can coach D-line. You're a natural. You played it. You understand it. You know, come out and work with the guys." And I went to work with the guys at my school, and I was just a natural. I was a natural with uh, you know, the communications and the inspiration and motivating. But before I actually was able to take the job, because of my background, I had to write a. Well, I didn't have to. I took the opportunity to write a letter to the Jefferson Parish school board superintendent because I knew they was going to run the background check on me. So what I did was I wrote a letter. I wrote like a 4-page
Mm-hmm.
letter, just explaining my situation, and basically telling you everything telling them everything that I'm telling you as far as what my story has been, and where I'm trying to go, and being a positive influence on young men. And I had to get a pardon, if you will, to be able to coach and be around students because of the gun charges and things of that nature. So it was granted,
Mm-hmm.
and I got the opportunity, and I took it head on. From that, teachers, students, players alike were like, "Mr. Irvin, you've been an incredible teacher. Like you would be an incredible educator." Everybody started telling me that, seeing it from the coaching on the football field, and how I work with the
Mm-hmm.
guys. And then I ended up taking a substitute position through a temp service through Kelly Services here locally in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
A temp service because of my background and things of that nature. And they took me in, and you can be a substitute through the temp service. So I took that opportunity, and I got every
Mm-hmm.
assignment from K-12 that you can imagine. I was in middle school, I was in kindergarten, I was in high school working with seniors, and I did it for like a year and a half. And I absolutely loved it. Like I absolutely felt. I'm like, my mom was telling me this whole time I would be great at this. Like she would, but I had to take the road I took. But she ended up having
Mm-hmm.
her way at the end of the day. It's funny
At
how
the
that
end of the
works, right?
day.
And
Yes.
I took off. Like I took off. Like I just classroom, man. It was just all natural for me. And I'm not saying that'll be the story for every young black man, but kids
Mm-hmm.
just lit up when I walked in the classroom. And like a lot of our young fellows, I experienced a lot of pushback from veteran educators in schools and in spaces that I was in. It was like, I would have teachers coming up to me like, "Man, I've had trouble with that guy or with that classroom for years." And you come
Mm-hmm.
in as a substitute, no certification, no formal training, and kids are wondering who's this new substitute teacher on campus, and there's a buzz like almost like I'm a rapper or something around school. And I did that at every school that I went to, and I'm like, "Yo, there's something here. There's something here. There's
Mm-hmm.
something," and I know I'm not the only one. I'm here telling this story, but there's a bunch of Larrys, I think, in this country that have very similar stories and can have unprecedented impact on kids in
Mm-hmm.
education if we sort of shifted the perception of how we ascribe intelligence and who we think is a great educator and what those skill sets and criteria are.
Yes, exactly. See, I knew you were sprinkling some gems throughout. I had to give the space for that story to come together, for a
Yeah,
number of reasons. The way you connect and
yeah,
your story will impact and inspire so many people. And the reason why I say that, research will show you, of course, the education field is not marketed to young black children, male or female. Um, thank God you had your mom, though, keeping it in your ear and pushing it your way. Um, and I love stories of how people enter the educational field in an untraditional way because it shows us, number one, is never too late. Number two, it's just not one path. And number three, again, education can be so impactful in the lives of people in so many different ways. So the fact that you had this to hold on to, and to go into to show you like your greatness and your excellence and your power and who you could be. And just again, Larry being Larry, the impact of Larry himself is what made you a black male educator.
yeah,
Nobody's degree in teaching, nobody's, all cert program. And I'm not saying that those things aren't important because it is important for teachers to have formal training.
right,
It is important for folks to understand how to
right,
actually impact instruction and academics. But I think at the foundation, black men, black people need to know that
absolutely,
that's not all it is. And that doesn't make you who you are, right? Like Larry being Larry, and who he was as a person, and the impact that he could make on children's lives is what
yes,
started that foundation to you building and becoming a great educator, right? Like all those other things are added value and needed, but you being you are who the children need at the end of the
yes,
day. to start with. So
Definitely.
I knew you were sprinkling some gems, okay, out here. I want to give you the space to like really bring that together. No,
Yeah, you
for
did a good job
real.
of pulling it
Your,
out.
no, your story is dope. That story is
Yeah.
inspiring, super dope. Now I know because of again
Yeah.
some of your experiences,
Thank you.
you went ahead and developed some super dope core values for your organization. There are two
Yeah.
that really stood out to me,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I need some more thought processing and some explaining on this. One of them is remain relevant. Talk to me about that. Why is that a core value in your organization, and what does that mean to remain relevant?
We're working with the youth on sort of two different spectrums, right? We have sort of one beneficiary and investment is our fellows, right, who are college aged
Mm-hmm.
young men, right, and then who they're going to impact, which is the next generation of educators. Our impact is sort of cyclical, if you will. So you have sort of two groups of folks really being impacted by the work we do. So remaining relevant, it's not it's a mandate. It's not something that we ask or that we suggest. It's a mandate. Just being current on what's going on right now in the world, popular events, music, uh, art, fashion, things of that nature. Not just being this conversation that we're having. Once again, is not just about education. Education being the floor from which we're working and the vehicle from which we're using, but being connected, right? It's all about connection. And if you want to be connected in today, or at any junction, if you will, you want to be connected. If you're not relevant, you're not speaking to the demographic that you're working with. You're not speaking to the audience directly to the audience and speaking in their vernacular and in their language. You're asking for some disconnect and some distance. And one thing that we've come in the door with is relevancy and taking pride in being in the know, if you will. And what's the current waves right now? What's the conversations right now being had? What's the perspective that's being adhered to right now? And it's crucial, I think, to connecting to youth collectively as a whole.
For sure. And I love that you brought that point out because I think many times, as educators, and I know we have a host of educators who really listen to this podcast, um, folks don't understand what it is to remain relevant and do it professionally and eloquently, right? So we're not asking you to dress like the kids. We're not asking you to be the kids. You are an adult
Right,
in this space. But
right,
it is super important to
right,
stay connected to the things that they are connected to. Because how else are you going to be able to relate to them? How else are you going to be able to be relational or just understand the ways and the frames of which they're thinking right now, right? So like everything now, right? The new age is like these TikToks, these TikTok dances and, all these other stuff. And definitely a different type of music than what we all used to listen to. It's still rap out there, but a whole nother
right,
wave, right?
right,
But
right,
understanding that helps us understand the frame of mind, how these young people are thinking, who their role models are, what they look to, what activities will actually catch their attention. And again, get in
right,
where you fit in. If you can be the cool teacher that can do a TikTok or have a TikTok page, then so be it. If you're not, that ain't your lane, stay out of it. But be
right.
up on it, right?
Yeah,
So I
right,
love that.
right.
I seen that. I was like, that's dope. Cause I think again,
Yeah,
when you're looking at teacher programs or teacher training or apprentices programs, we don't talk a lot about how important it is for the teachers or the one involved with the children to be connected to youth culture. So remain relevant to me is most certainly a core value of being an educator in today's society. So
yeah,
love that that's a core value of your organization.
yeah. And you see a lot of times, I think,
For
sort of this
sure.
just add water approach, if you will, to education and things of that nature. It's just, I think it's part of the bigger conversation around, you know, what's considered okay, what's the criteria, allowing people to bring their full authentic selves into classroom from a content standpoint, from a connection standpoint. All of those things are sort of multi-layered in that big umbrella conversation, I think, around cultural connection and cultural, what I like to call cultural currency. Having some currency, like you said, that's going to look different for every teacher. I was just fortunate enough,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a hip hop head. I'm still very current and relevant, from the golden era, right? And it's not just about hip hop, but that's sort of one avenue in music one avenue that's always been a viable one as far as connection to the youth. But I grew up on the locks and cash money and the hot boys and things of that nature. But I'm listening to Baby. I'm listening to Dirk. I'm listening to Bodie James and Griselda and Benny the Butcher and all that right now, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the conversation. That's the conversation right now, and I'm gonna remain in tune, and it starts at the top.
Listen, I love that. Let's go hip hop heads, okay? Because you shouted out all the new school dudes right now. Um, and I have a 16-year-old, so he keeps me relevant.
Yeah,
He probably would tell y'all I keep him relevant because I dress him. You know, I'm into fashion. Like even the new school fashion, a little tricky for me, but we gonna put it
right,
together in a way where you still look cool. But definitely
right,
being in tune
right.
and and hip hop is a generational connector. I always feel like that. So
Yep,
even though the beats, the
yep,
rhymes, the language, and things change, but hip hop is hip hop still throughout generations because the elements are still there. But yes, shout
yeah,
out to you for still being connected to hip hop because that's going to keep you connected to the youth for sure,
yeah. And look, I don't even do it
without
for
a
that.
doubt.
It's just so happened to be right. As far as me personally, it just so happened to be just sort of part of who I am. I mean, it's not like I'm trying to check this box
Mm-hmm.
or let me remain relevant so I can connect. It just happens to be there.
Right, it's what you into. Same for me. I'm still into it,
Yeah,
but it
right.
allows you very much so to stay connected with the young people. You have
Absolutely.
another core value which I really loved, and it says defy convention. Can you speak to that and how that's definitely probably a driver for what you do with young men in your program?
Yeah, that concept permeates every aspect of the work that we do, from programming to branding to marketing, um, to myself, just how we approach the lens from which we approach education. I sort of alluded to that earlier, as far as with me having the lens and experience that I've had, and being very thoughtful and intentional about how we connect to this particular demographic, with methods, and avenues we're going to use to do that. And I just think I will work on so many levels, right? You think about like from a statistical data standpoint, black men only represent 2-3% of the teaching pool. So just the
Mm-hmm.
attempt in itself, the symbolization of the work that we're doing in itself is really going against the grain, if you will, as far as define traditional tenets and what's been the experience as far as education. We understand that black men as a whole aren't seen as intellectual leaders, and we're really changing the conversation and the
Mm-hmm.
climate of the conversation around in K-12 as far as what that means. We've seen black men as janitors, right? We've seen black men as athletic coaches. We've seen black men as
Mm-hmm.
disciplinarians and intervention specialists and things of that nature. But what we haven't had a really, really deep
Yes.
conversation and unpacked is black men being seen as intellectual leaders, no matter what
Mm-hmm.
size they are. If I may put emphasis on, um, and with define convention in all those ways. We're also, our work isn't just the recruitment, placement, training piece. It's also the conversations that we have to have with institutions as far as setting a tone for our
Mm-hmm.
our young black men going into their spaces and sort of trying to bridge the cultural gaps, if you will. Because Brothers in Power Teach isn't like your average K-12 space. We do things untraditionally, if you will, as far as our trainings and the conversations and dialogues that we have, and the lens from which we view equity and things of that nature. And it has to be a collaboration with those school districts, and or whether it's a single site or district wide or statewide. We have to have conversations with these school leaders and these systems leaders, if you will, because we can't just drop our young men off and turn our backs on them. There has to be a relationship. There has to be
Mm-hmm.
uh, sort of a mold, right? That's founded with these partners, and a lot of our work is really, really on the institutional side as well, creating spaces that our young
Mm-hmm.
men can go in, fail,
Yes.
correct, and then succeed, and all of that, all of what we do, how we hold our ciphers, everything we do is with that intention and with that strategy and with that thought, and we're surgical as far as our implementation and how we get that done, and all of that really circles back to us defying convention in a lot of regards.
For sure. There are like two really important things that I want to harp on in what you just explained. Um, One is the need for your young men to still be supported after they're placed and what that really looks like. So, of course, one, them being connected to just you, the organization, the network of other Black male educators, but two, your organization being connected to the leaders, um, and the system leaders or the district leaders, and being able to train them on how to appropriately support the young men that you're
Yes.
placing into their schools. And that one sometimes is a miss, right? Because you would deal with educator and educational organizations who are like, give us your people. We need Black people. We want Black people. But when you get them, are you able to support them? Are you able to sustain them? Are you able to retain them? And most times it's no, right? You got Black people. Look, I did this for 2, 3 years. I'm tired. I can't. My boss is racist or these oppressive structures. Um, and when you're talking
I see it all
about
the time.
Black men specifically, yes, because they're just tired, right? Like I can't, like I tried, and I want to be here for the kids. That's the other thing. Like they want to be here for the kids, and most of the time, it's not the structure of the kid; it is the structure of the organization. And we know, like people don't necessarily
Absolutely.
leave jobs; they leave managers, they leave bosses. So when you're offering
Leaders, yeah.
training to folks and you want folks to go ahead and like, okay, I want to give you this educators, but let me also introduce you to these series of workshops that I want you to go through to be culturally proficient in order to support these Black males. They're like, we'll get back to you on that one, right? Like that is the response that folks are generally met with in space in educational
Yeah.
leadership. Oh, you don't want to give me no price
Yes.
tag for your own training. So you're gonna
Yeah.
run my guys out of here after 2, 3 years. Um, which again is a major problem. But I would love to
Yes.
hear, how do you guys support aspiring educators to be respected for their intellect and instructional expertise, and not used for their relational value with kids? Because you
It's
already
12
described
o'clock.
exactly the spaces. Oh,
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
what?
We
You already described exactly the spaces that people like go to or get to, right? Like janitors, in the behavioral spaces, in the sports world, coaches and things of that nature. But Black men have large intellectual, and instructional value in schools, have a different lens and can impact it majorly. So how do you support your aspiring educators to be respected for their intellect?
we continue to have the conversation with with said school leader or district leader. It's one we have to revisit. We have evaluations. We have check-ins with our school leaders. Uh, we're utilizing going forward what we call innovation configuration maps, which pretty much lays out in dimensions, right, culturally, from a content standpoint, from a disciplinary standpoint, from a climate standpoint. It's a A to Z assessment of schools and sort of, some of the weak spots and gray areas, if you will. But we constantly, Shayna, are having a conversation with school leaders. What happens a lot, like you alluded to, we have so many stories of our young men going in as a Brothers in Power to Teach fellow, as a prospective educator, and then they end up getting bathroom duty or disciplinary duty,
Mm,
or they're asked to give special attention to a young man or a student that has behavior issues, and we have to constantly go back, sit down with principals, and reiterate these are prospective educators. They're going to be working in educator capacities, teaching in front of the
mm-hmm,
classroom, leading classrooms as paraprofessionals, things of that nature. We're training a prospective educator, leading from in
mm-hmm,
front of the classroom. That conversation we have to have all the time because it's almost a default sort of setting a lot of times for, and we all know this, right? For black men, if there's a presence of a black man on school, a lot of times they're going to be, they're going to check that box for school leaders. If there's some behavior issues or
mm-hmm,
disciplinary issues, it's sort of the default go get the black man to deal with Tyrone and bad Jacob and what have you, and things of that nature, right? And let them go rough up Derek and what have you, and Travis and get them together. And it's just shifting that thinking and shifting that
mm-hmm.
paradigm is a constant go at, if you will. So I'm in a lot of
Yep.
different offices, back and forth, to reiterating that all the time. And I think that's all we can do, and really offer those conversations, and offer the space, right? Offer the space for those school leaders and those school systems, um, to be introspective, and self-assess, and self-scout, if you will. We're constantly applying that pressure.
For sure. What skills? Because we got a lot of educational leaders who also listen to our podcast, and I think it would be great for them to hear this. If I'm a school leader, I'm a district leader. Like, what skills should I possess to help me sustain Black male educators? Like, what should I be doing in my schools to make sure that I'm supporting my Black male educators?
I'm trying to see how I want to answer this one, Shayna.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think the big bucket, the big bowl sort of issue, in this is deficit perspective, right? Is the deficit perspective of Black men. There's a lot of times, just like from the student standpoint, right? Young Black male students and how they're perceived in schools. A lot of times we're seen as liabilities from day one and not assets, and we have to climb that uphill mountain, if you will, to be seen, or always sort of prove ourselves to be seen, as an asset in the school space. So I would like to say, to address that question directly, if it's a skill set, if it's considered a skill set, I think we need a little bit more humanity in the school leaders. Think about how like we said, the perception of Black men and how they're always sort of by default seen as disciplinarians, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a level of humanity that's missing in regards to how we're seen, how we're viewed, right? I don't think we're viewed as intellectual leaders as a whole, and I think that's because, just like in society, right? I think a lot of times we presume that education is sort of this safe space that doesn't deal with the same issues and barriers that society presents. A lot of times, I think they're even more magnified because they're more concentrated spaces, right? And microcosms of society. But I just think we need a little bit more humanity in school leaders. I don't know how you I guess screen or vet for that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the constant thing that I see, or the biggest gap that I see a lot of times, is that people don't see our young men as intellectual leaders, and it's because there's a lack. I think there's a lack of humanity, and I think about the sort of the short leash that our young men have, right? They don't always get a chance to sort of fail, correct, and then go on to succeed. Their mistakes, their shortcomings are magnified tenfold. Um, we're really ready to write a lot of them off on their first, second failure. They're not educators. They're not ready. I think all of that, Shayna, if this answers your question, is just it's because we have a lack of humanity, and we're just not seen as, I don't think, whole people, in a sense. As far as Black men, there's a lot from a perception
Mm-hmm.
standpoint that we're carrying in society, but also definitely when we walk into K-12 spaces, it's a store within a store, if you will.
Yeah, and it definitely answers my question, because I think sometimes what happens is when you ask a question about a skill set or strategy or what folks need, right? Like, folks look for the technical aspects, right? Folks look like for that checklist they want, right? So if I do this, then I'll get this. What you're actually asking folks to do is to challenge your own mindset, your way of being, and your way of thinking. And there are absolutely trainings. And what this connects to, and I'm laughing because I actually hate the term like diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Because I feel like when you talk about that, it's like a checklist for people, like, oh, we have a chief for DEI type stuff. But what you're
Yeah.
asking for is just that, right? Some of those trainings that people are talking about having, like, have it and live it and do it for real and understand where your
Yeah.
bias lie when you're talking about having
Yes.
Black male educators in your building. And if you are specifically like interested in, like, I do want to increase the number of Black male educators in my building, and I'm dedicated in that, then challenge yourself to take yourself through a series of mindset kind of trainings that's going to challenge you to be different, so that when that Black male educator walks through the door, you're ready to receive him and respect him beyond what he can do relationally and his value for the relationship he can build with students, right? Like, Look at him as an intellect, invite him into conversations, ask him instead of giving him the curriculum, give it to him, but then ask him what he thinks about it, how he wants to approach it, how he feels like this may have a different impact for children. But talk to him around the curriculum. Don't talk to him about, oh, I've really been having these challenges with some of these young Black boys. What activities can we implement in our building to make sure? Like, because that's the conversations that start to kind of roll around, right? Like,
Yeah,
those are the
yeah,
things that happen when you see a
yeah,
Black man walk in, like, ooh, what sport did he used to play? I wonder if he could be our new basketball coach. They don't look at that Black man like, ooh, look at him. What his degrees in?
right,
Can he impact our math
right,
department? But those
right.
are absolutely the thought processes that should be happening when looking at all Black educators that walk into the room. But specifically,
Yes,
stop boxing in these Black male educators. Stop boxing them into these thoughts of what we have or what Black men should
yeah,
be. So I love the fact that you are taking on and challenging and talking to these districts about what your fellows, right? Because there's also a stake in that. I am trusting, right? After I'm developing these people, I'm giving them to you, passing them off to you to hone on the skills and help them progress. So there's a certain trust that I'm having with you in your district. So you're damn right. I'm about to have a seat at this table and talk about what you should be doing to progress the fellow that we help to build. Right? Like you're a partner
yeah.
in this work. So I love that you are kicking in the door, having them conversations because they need to be had for sure.
Period.
Yes, I would love to hear from you too about policy influence. Okay, you are a
Yeah,
Black man in this space. You are a powerful Black man in this space right now with all the work that you're doing around Black male educators, right? And to be like pinpoint and hyper focused on that. How do you think policy can influence the crease of Black male educators, right? Because you have a whole organization that if some policies changes, your organization will probably blow up bigger than what it is now. So talk to us about
yeah.
ways you think policy can help influence what you're doing.
Just, I think and there's probably be a lot of pushback for this, but I think demographic, demographical, incentive, incentivize schools, incentivize
Mm-hmm.
districts to hire more Black men in a real way, not a surface level sort of incentive, not a sort of
Mm-hmm.
cookie cutter checkbox, diversity credit, if you will, way, but in a real way, impacting schools and the success and environments of those schools in a tangible way for hiring black black men and really being intentional about that. And I think it's not just a Black male conversation. For teachers in general, we need to have more a bigger conversation around what's the incentive, whether it's repaying school loans and debts, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
You're hearing a bunch of conversations right now about housing credits and things of that nature, and helping with more pathways for teachers and more incentives for teachers as far as housing and things of that nature. So I think everything right now, from a policy standpoint, because it all ties together. Policy sets the tone, right? From the hill coming on down to how
For
things are implemented,
sure.
whether it's in charter schools or public schools and things of that nature. But I think we have to just continue to have this conversation around for our demographic conversation around Black men, and then just in general, how do we incentivize folks to want to become educators again? A lot of this work is a rebranding, a remarketing, if you will, of the narrative of the educator. It's the educator, the education profession, right? The teacher profession has lost a lot of gloss over the years. It isn't
Yes.
chic, it isn't sexy,
Mm-hmm.
I think like it used to be. That was I ain't gonna say it was always lucrative, but it was definitely a position in the community that I think was heralded and recognized.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But even talking about how lucrative education, that's another part of the conversation, the compensation, right? Just the general compensation. We need to start paying teachers, and there is some. I know I'm going on a rabbit hole. There is some beauty though. I think that's coming with sort of K-12 being on fire right now, because it's forcing us to turn over some new leaves in regards to policy and
Mm-hmm.
how we're going to support teachers full circle, and making that
Yep.
profession one of one where you can thrive, and it doesn't seem like this just continuous black hole, right? This perpetual black hole of like just being overworked and underpaid. We need to start valuing all of our teachers,
Mm-hmm.
but in particular, if we want to see a more diverse teacher talent pipeline, the missing piece right now, from a policy standpoint, from on a ground standpoint, the missing piece is Black men right now. And we all know it. I'm just being
Mm-hmm.
explicit about it. But the missing piece in education right now is black men.
For sure. And you're not going down a rabbit hole at all. Policy is a rabbit hole, meaning you'll see one policy and then is this
Right.
roadblock, is this bureaucracy? Like it's a rabbit hole in itself, and
Yeah.
complex to try to go ahead and break down. So I mean, again, you're hitting points which are, again, very effective to illuminate the things that are needed, to support just not black male educators, just educators in general.
In general. Yeah.
And some of the things that we similarly agree with, especially at the Center for Black Educator Development, in our efforts to rebuild the Black teacher pipeline, for sure. One thing that I think would our listeners would definitely benefit with hearing from you, because your program is so expansive, right? You went from, I think, starting out with like 6 people, now you got 60 a year across 2 states, like all of that kind of stuff. What folks struggle with is actual recruitment, um, of young men into the field, which I definitely know that you've already alluded to on this podcast, is the retention of it and the sustaining of it and how you support young men holistically.
Yeah.
But how do you
Yes.
even get them into the door to be able to take, benefit of what you guys are doing?
Our best marketing tool, I think, just a tenet of marketing in general is the word of mouth of our fellows, our alumni base. They are recruitment levels and funnels in themselves. Now we have a different, sort of strategic approaches. We have uh, what we call a campus rush. Is basically we go to every junior college, university in the local area. We're at LSU, we're at Tulane, we're at Southern, we're at SUNO. The local colleges and universities, we pick a day uh, each fall semester, each spring semester, where we go up with our canvassing team, with our alumni, with our staff, and we basically bombard the quad of a college and university, passing out wristbands, flyers, just having the conversations, right, about really heavily branding the work and having that conversation, really touching the people, if you will. That guerrilla style,
Mm-hmm.
sort of in your face contact and marketing and branding, I think, is our bread and butter. We keep a pulse on the colleges and universities. We're now expanding that to high school. So I have a 23 site tour coming up across Louisiana high schools coming up for the fall. So I'll
So,
be speaking at 23 schools across the state. Hopefully that'll be expanded nationally soon. So really just using that storytelling aspect and things of that nature. We built somewhat of an informal referral system with the relationships that we have with professors, adjuncts at the colleges and universities. So there's a couple different levels that we can pull as far as really opening up our pipelines. Recruitment is really our strongest. It's really our strength. If I had to pick one, Shayna, whether it was placement,
mm-hmm.
training, recruitment, branding, marketing, I would really say recruitment right up there. We've always been really good. And I think for a lot of different reasons, right? My story, the branding, the language we use, that connection, right? Being relevant, our values, we really live those things. And I think it just really works. We found a really potent elixir in regards to, really connecting with the demographic that we work with from multiple layers, man. So we've done really good about being consistent on the ground and keeping a pulse on the local colleges,
Mm-hmm.
universities, and soon to be now high school. And we know how to check the pulse and get the temperature of the young folks. It's our strength. It's our calling card, and we're just going to continue to expand on that. So
Again, kudos to you, because people can't figure out how to get young men through the door. But one thing I always say, um, is especially about black men. Black men want to be in community with other black men, because nobody understands a black man better than a black man. So the more than black men have what you would consider infinity spaces or support groups or networks, that aren't attached to a stigma of a support group, right? Like, for you guys, I'm doing this professionally, right? Like, this is I'm trying to get a job, but it's all of these powerful black men in a space with me who understand who I am and the challenges that I'm facing. Black men love to be in community with other black men. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm pretty sure your fellows are like the number one connection and marketing piece for other brothers, for sure. So shout out to you for
by
that.
far,
But what this also points out is a very relevant piece of the work. Um, you can't use black men as tokens. So if you really are invested in diversity, especially increasing the number of Black males in your organizations within your districts, you have to allow Black men to lead too. And not lead as being your mouthpiece, to be a recruitment lead or a coordinator, like having voice and agency within your districts to be able to increase the number of Black males. So that's so important. And I think your organization, because it's led by a Black
Absolutely.
man, and the way, again, you guys are rolling and supporting Black people with Black men supporting other Black men, is a key example of that. Like, Black men want to be in
Yeah.
community with other Black men for sure. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely, we do.
One piece before we go that I would love to highlight and talk about is that you are a TED fellow, or you're involved in the TED fellowship,
Yes,
which I
ma'am.
think is huge because I've never even heard of it, didn't even know about it. Until I read about
Right.
your story. Can you please talk to us a little bit
Yeah.
about this fellowship and like how it's going to like really catapult your organization, or how you hope that it will?
It already has. It already has. So I applied for the fellowship. I think there's 2 cycles per year. I applied for the fellowship last year. We needed just at the time, we needed a splash. We needed we needed a tidal wave of splash and visibility, I think, for the organization. So I decided to apply. And TED is, I don't know how familiar you are with TED Talks in that stage, but there's a
Mm-hmm.
fellowship attached to that. So in the fellowship, part of the fellowship package comes a TED Talk as well. But it's man, it's really difficult to explain and articulate how being in this space and that global brand and Brothers Power to Teach, being able to stand next to that global brand, how it's ascended our visibility and recognition, the level of partnerships nationally. It's going to be catalyst in our expansion. We have about 15 cities we're going to be expanding to over the next 6 to 7 years, from a funding standpoint, from a credibility standpoint. Just me having a TED talk and people, you know, people just give. There's a level of credit and credibility and pedigree and just benefit of the doubt now that I think we have in regards to whether people are on the fence about sort of our work and the credibility of the leader, if you will. I think now
Mm-hmm.
standing and having that affiliation, it's really rubbed off a lot of the doubt, I think, for folks as far as the credibility of the organization, man. And it's I have an incredible TED talk right now as well. If I must say so myself, it's about at 1.7 million views. I'm hoping it'll be at 2 million
Hey.
by the end of the year. Yeah, and as it was released just last November, so I think it's doing pretty good
Mm-hmm.
numbers. But the message is good, and but it's an incredible experience. It's executive coaching, it's personal coaching. I get to travel and go to these different conferences across the globe with opportunities to speak and be in community with activists and leaders, systems leaders across the globe, and being recognized as a global innovator for education. Man, it's just really ascended the visibility and recognition and credibility of the brand. Uh, it's taking it to a whole nother stratosphere. And we're starting to really reap that harvest in regards to that credibility. We've earned it though. We've earned it, So
Mm-hmm.
even though it is very beneficial, it wasn't handed to us. We had to go out and do the work for 8 years. And now, I say the organization is TED Fellows, not just Larry Irvin, but as an organization with TED Fellows, because I'm going to leverage those benefits and maximize sort of the benefits that comes with the personal benefit of being a TED Fellow. I'm leveraging all of it for the organization, as I always do anyway. So, Brothers in Power to Teach has a TED Talk, not Larry Irvin.
Larry, I love that for you. And I'm definitely going to take a look at your tech talk. And
Yeah,
just,
please do.
folks out there listen to this podcast, they should. We heard you sprinkle a little bit about your journey right here, but I'm pretty sure your TED talk goes
Yeah,
into some more in depth about Larry and who he is, and very inspiring the work that you're doing. And again, what's most inspiring for me is not just your redemption story, but doing something that empowers and impacts others, and knowing the importance of reaching back and connecting to the lives of other young men so that they can again turn that around twofold and do that for other young people is just always going to be in my eyes amazing work. So super
yes, ma'am.
excited to connect and
Thank you,
listen to your TED talk. Very exciting for sure.
thank you.
So we have reached the time on our show where we give folks the opportunity to thank a Black teacher or some Black teachers. So Larry, we're going to give you the open mic and space to thank a Black teacher or any Black teachers that you wish at this time.
yeah, I want to give a big shout out to my. She was a journalism professor at a junior college I attended at home in New Orleans, Delgado Community College. Her name is Miss Bianca Bauman. It's a really long story that goes into how we connected, but she kind of just pulled me aside randomly in the hallway one day. I haven't declared a major. She told me I was going to be her chief editor. I'm like, what you talking about? She didn't know anything about me. Just saw me in my hoodie, my pants sagging, walking down the hallway. She was like, boy, come here. You're going to be my, and my journalism story started then. As far as me even believing or thinking that I could do something in regards to writing. And I want to give a big shout out to Bianca Bauman. Right now, she's been a catalyst in my journey. She really ignited the fire. I think for me to be, to really delve into writing and journalism and really explore that space and find greatness in that space as well. She gave me sort of that affirmation that I think a lot of us need when we're in doubt of how great we can be, man. So big shout to Bianca Bauman, my senior editor at the Dolphin for Delgado Community College.
Love that. Shout out to you, Miss Bianca, for seeing something in this young man. Okay. Larry, listen, we want to thank you for being with us today, for sharing your story, for giving us a little peel back curtain into Brothers Empowered to Teach. This has been an excellent time. So we thank you and appreciate you. Any parting words for our folks listening today?
Man, follow me. Follow us at Real Bros Teach. That's RealBrushTeach. Real Bros Teach. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find me personally. My Instagram is High Risk CEO on Instagram. But you can definitely find us at Real Bros Teach as well, as far as the organizational page. Yeah, man, follow the word. Go watch the TED Talk, please. So, I want to get to 2 million views by the end of this year. So every view counts. And just be looking for Brothers Empowered to Teach in K-12 spaces and education spaces and college, collegiate spaces and HBCU spaces going forward, man. We're going to be pounding the pavement, man, looking for young Black educators.
Shout out. Thank you so much, Larry. Listen, everybody, thank you for joining us today for Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. Shout out to Brightbeam and the Center for Black Educator Development for providing us with this platform where we talk to real people in the real struggle doing the real work. And please don't forget to tell a friend and tell a friend and then tell them again to listen in, to subscribe to our podcast, all major platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. We're everywhere, y'all. But please enjoy. We'll see you again next week. Peace, everybody.